1 second, wait, 1 second, wait.
Oh, sorry.
Starting recording. I'll point to you.
Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I'm part of Two Sharp Needles. My partner is Gavin Rice, and we are cutting the grooves of history. And today we're going to talk about a project that was started by myself and that will be continued by others. And I want to talk about this as we go and share some information about the history of this recording project that was recorded on wax cylinders. And it's an important thing because wax cylinders, they last forever. And the fun thing was that we were taking technology, taking history, and taking a permanent time and going full speed astern. It was kind of fun. So, Gavin, how are you?
I'm very good, Jack. Thank you very much for asking. And how are you?
I'm doing very fine, thank you. This Sunday.
Yes, very nice Easter Sunday in Rochester. There's not a cloud in the sky. I got to wear my top hat, luckily, and my my morning wear. And Nora had a Easter service, so I got to watch, which is very nice. And
you have an Easter bonnet?
No, I told her she should probably get one, but
with all the frills upon it, as it were.
Exactly. And speaking of Easter, actually, Wyatt Markus, we're going to be talking about Wyatt Markus today. We were going to originally have him on today, but of course he was a little bit busy with some Easter plans, but we'll have him on in the future. And Wyatt Markus is going to be carrying the torch of Jack's Edison Recording Project. I apologize. And Jack, I would like you to talk a little bit about the origins of the project, what you've done in the project, and the future of the project.
All right. The last part, I think, has a lot to do with you and Wyatt, but the whole idea of the project was I was basically given the opportunity to take over a museum that was really in pretty bad shape. There were no curtains in the museum, so the sunlight came in and faded everything, so there was no signatures on any of the papers, stuff like that. And it was pretty pathetic, to be perfectly honest. And so I said, I have to totally redevelop this whole thing, and had to come up with different ideas and different things. So the first thing I did, I threw everything out that was in there and started bringing in good stuff, put curtains on the windows so the sunshine didn't come in. And I said, we have to reach out because there was nothing about Menlo Park. When you would read books about history, they would talk about various museums, but the only museum they didn't mention was the museum in Menlo Park, which was pretty pathetic. And I said, because this is where everything happened. You don't go to Secaucus, New Jersey to study the Battle of Gettysburg because the Battle of Gettysburg was there. And so one has to understand that you have to take what you have, be it as little as it is, and use imagination, just like Edison did. And then you can touch the entire world. And that is what we did. We created, or I should say, I created, the Thomas Edison Recording Project. And the objective was exactly what Thomas Edison's objective was. And that was to record the voices of famous men and women and individuals who had changed the course of history. And so I made it the major goal of this museum. Now, it got a little difficult because I had to find wax cylinders. And you have to understand, in the 1990s, this was not an easy thing to do because there weren't many people making them. And the one person I found making them, they came in every size except for the correct one, which was a problem. And so I took a lot of original cylinders and shaved them down and started the project. And we started with the radio personality by the name of Joe Franklin. And Joe Franklin was a radio personality. He's in the Guinness Book of Records. He's on the radio longer than anybody. And he became a great supporter of my work and also connected me with lots of people. And that's the secret. When you start doing a project like that, you talk to people and find ways of expanding it. Now, the thing is that we eventually used a fireside phonograph. We called it the famous fireside because it was in more famous homes than any Edison phonograph had ever been. And starting, we did it with Joe Franklin. The fireside was being worked on by Charlie Hummel. He was straightening everything out with me. Peter Dilge was working on a recorder for me and helping me with a recording horn. And so Joe Franklin's recording was done kind of piecemeal. We used a larger Edison phonograph. And we made the recording. It was in the papers. We did all kinds of stuff. It was filmed. It was on television. And it got a lot of press. But it wasn't much of anything because, first off, a lot of people didn't know who Joe Franklin was. And so Joe, sweet guy, he introduced me to people because he knew everybody. And the next recording we did was with Tony Randall. Now, there was a patron saint that we had. His name was Jerome Hines. He was an operatic basso from the Metropolitan Opera House. He held the record for 41 years at the Metropolitan, but he was also the secret messenger between Khrushchev and Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was a fascinating man. And once again, he knew everybody. And he said, Jack, I'm going to sit there and introduce you to all these people. We're going to make lots of recordings. I said, okay, great. And so he introduced me to Tony Randall. And Tony Randall, if you don't know who that is, if you've ever seen The Odd Couple on television, he was Felix. He was always neat. Of course, he said in real life, that was bullshit. And but the thing was, we went to his home in New York City and brought the fireside and made a series of recordings. He told me he wanted to record just like Joseph Jefferson. And he said one of his children, he named Jefferson in honor of that famous actor, Joseph Jefferson, who made recordings for Columbia in 1903. And so we did those recordings. They really went well. And then I started sending out letters all over the place. And I sent them to every former president. Everybody said no, except for one. His name was Gerald R. Ford. And he said, I'd be delighted. And so with a lot of work and a lot of setup, we brought the whole recording setup all the way out to California and went to the presidential site that was his, which used to be Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers' mother's place. So it's kind of cool. It had a lot of Hollywood history. And we made recordings with the former president. Now, that was an exciting thing. Think about this. Recording the voice of the 38th president on wax. It hadn't been done since Theodore Roosevelt had made recordings for Edison in 1912. And to honor the event, I had a recording of Theodore Roosevelt. And I played the recording of Theodore Roosevelt to Gerald Ford. So symbolically, through the phonograph, the 26th president spoke to the 38th. I mean, history and recording doesn't get any better than that. And Gerald Ford totally forgot who he was because he was having fun. And he talked about his father's paint store, and he talked about working in a Hungarian restaurant. And and talk about World War II and so many different things. And our meeting was scheduled to last 15 minutes. It lasted 2 hours. And we had a phenomenal time. And we laughed, played records. He told me about his father saving money and buying a phonograph. And he said he remembered winding it up and listening to it. I mean, these are amazing things when you think about it. The President of the United States actually making a recording. We added lots of other people after that. I mean, it's good to have a president as one of your people that you've recorded. And we got Walter Cronkite, the voice of the 20th century. And he told me something very important about recording and old phonographs. He said, my grandparents, they had Edison. He said, my parents, they had Victor. He said, it didn't matter. Wherever I was, I had to wind it. But the thing was that Walter Cronkite understood the importance of these recordings and the whole idea of the project, and wrote a beautiful note in honor of it, which I have shared with Wyatt, who is going to take over this project. We recorded an individual from the first voyage to the moon, Buzz Aldrin. We recorded Peter Jennings, the commentator on ABC News, Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes, Mickey Rooney, June Lockhart, Celeste Holm, Robert Merrill of the Metropolitan Opera, Eddie Bracken, one of the greats of vaudeville, early silent pictures, and later radio. And his last role was as the Duncan Toy Man in Home Alone 2. And we were able to record so many individuals, and I'm not giving you all of them, just some of them. But by the time we had done this, the entire world was talking about us. And this little museum, nondescript, became the focal point. Countless biographies, programs, and news articles around the world. Now, this is very important to explain to people that you can do it. If you have an idea and you take that idea and you make it work following the ideas followed by Edison. See, Edison's ideas are not passé. The ideas that he used, the examples that he used, are as relevant today as they were then. And that's why, as I pass the torch to Wyatt Markus, as he takes over this recording project, it is with my warmest wishes for his success and for him to reach and grab all of those individuals in the world who influenced it, who changed it, and record their voices on wax and make history, because there's nothing quite like it. I mean, if you think about it, share the history and take the voices of today and share them for tomorrow's years. It's very, very important. And that's all I wanted to say about this. And I'm sure you have a number of things you'd like to ask, perhaps, about this. I know that there is much more I'd love to say, and I'm sure there's lots of things I have forgotten, but I've forgotten more things than I knew at one time. You know, what can I say? It's been a long time since we started this. It's been about almost 25 years, quarter of a century. And almost all of those folks are gone. But their voices are retained on wax. And they're part of this very important, and I'm anticipating, long-lasting project. Gavin, that's what I thought I'd say.
Beautifully said. Wow. Like, you know, I've been talking to Jack about this idea for a long time, but that the stories that you told just made me want to, go along with Wyatt and do it. Even like that, my ambition to do it just grew, and what Jack said is absolutely true about how their voices recorded on wax will outlast many of us by 100 more years if they're treated properly, of course. And that's the magical thing about this is now if let's say Jack Stanley were to give Wyatt the recording of the president that it was Ford, right? Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford, yes.
If Jack gives Wyatt the cylinder of Gerald Ford, and let's say we record Joseph Biden, Donald J. Trump, whoever, we could play that for them and recreate what you did by playing Theodore Roosevelt to Ford.
Yes, that's important. It's continuing the story. That's the important thing. I mean, can you think about the amazing part? Theodore Roosevelt speaking to Gerald Ford. I mean, it's mind-boggling if you think about it. But
it is. It's generational conversations, and not every day do you get to. I can only imagine back in the 80s, right, or the 90s when did you record Gerald Ford?
1999.
In the 1999, that was the height of that was the beginning actually of the laser disc and the CD era, right? And
yeah,
so having to hear someone back then, Gerald Ford hearing Theodore Roosevelt on wax recorded almost at that point 100 years ago must have been mind-blowing, and it still is today. And it's still
it was interesting what Ford said as he listened to it. He said it's a strange voice, and that it was. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt's voice is a very unique one, and it was even remarked as unique in his day, but much more so today. But he said, you could give that speech today, which I thought was very funny. And he would sit down and he listened, and when we made the recording, we made 3 recordings. We did it 3 times, took 3 takes, and I held the cards for him so he could read it, which was really kind of cool. I have some pictures of this, which is really amazing, which I should share. Maybe we can add them to this. I don't know if we can. But he wrote me a letter afterwards saying how much fun it was for him to make the recording. And it brought back a lot of memories for him. Because his father, he was adopted by them. And his father was named Ford, and his father adopted him. And he said he adored his father. His father did everything he could for him. And I got to meet Betty Ford, which was really cool.
Very good.
And kind of wandered around. He showed me kind of stuff, pointed out pictures and things like that. It's an opportunity few people really get, I must say. Walter Cronkite, the same. Think about it. The man who talked to everyone. And Mike Wallace, we did the interview in his kitchen. And we made the recording barefoot. He wanted to be barefoot in his kitchen. That's what he wanted. That's fine. And we sat down and talked for 3 hours on history. And I asked him questions, because he went to school with John F. Kennedy. And he was from the same town as John F. Kennedy. And so I said, what about the presidents? What did you think of them? And what did they think of you? And he said, FDR, I didn't really know too well. He said, Harry Truman, what you saw is what you got. He said, Eisenhower hated me. He said, John F. Kennedy, I knew. He said, LBJ, I knew as well. And he said, Richard Nixon, was a very special case. He said, Richard Nixon asked me to be his press secretary. And I said, Nixon? He said, yeah, Nixon. And he said, Nixon really liked me. And he said, I had to think about it. And I thought that if I did it, it would totally change my career. So I declined. But he said, Nixon was always very good to me. And at that time, we went on until we got to George W. Bush. And he had some rather negative things to say, which I will leave out of this program. But someday I will write them down, which they are fascinating. I got to record Larry Hagman, who was from I Dream of Jeannie.
That's right.
And JR from Dallas. And he was fascinating too. And he started talking, and then he kind of lost it and started letting out with a litany of 4-letter words on the cylinder. The wax nearly melted. It was quite a fascinating thing. We put the wax away and we said, well, we're not going to play that one. Mickey Rooney was fascinating. You know, think about that. Mickey Rooney's career went back to the 1920s. And he, you know, and while we were recording, he kept coming up to me and nudging me and saying, I wish Spence was here. I wish Spence was here. And I said, Spence? He said, Spencer Tracy. He played Thomas Edison. And he was fascinating because he was such a bit of history. And there's so much more that can be said. And all of these people had such a profound effect on our history and taught me. I mean, it's an amazing thing. It was an amazing history lesson for me to learn from all of it, which I hope I can share.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, you know, I have a very fair experience in recording cylinders, and I can tell you that recording singular dialogue can have challenges. You have, you know, I do experiments with cylinders, and Jack, do you remember what horn you used to record the voices?
Yes, I used a small, thin recording horn.
Perfect.
Specifically designed for recording.
Exactly, right. And recording voices in particular. And if you ever are considering, say that again, Jack?
Orchestrally, it didn't work too well. You needed a bigger horn.
Exactly, right. And even using bigger horns to record small dialogue can pose challenges. So if any of you are watching are interested in starting to record cylinders, start off small for voices. Then you can, you know, expand your arsenal a little bit, which is what I did. But one thing I'd like to mention about this is Jack grew up in a time and you did the recording project in a time before the internet was you know, all spread across the earth. And unfortunately, nowadays, the internet makes it even more challenging. And this is ironic. It makes it even more challenging to contact these people and to get them to agree to do these things. Me and Wyatt Markus contacted Neil deGrasse Tyson. We contacted a few others as well. And unfortunately, they read the letter, we emailed them and everything, but unfortunately, this is what they said, that the mailbox and the internet mailbox is too full. And Neil deGrasse Tyson had other priorities. But if you are, like, I'm just continuing, if you or anybody watching are interested in recording cylinders, be patient, especially people that are famous. It's very difficult because everybody's just itching to talk to them. Everybody is sending them messages daily. And patience is key with this. If that was Wyatt's first, maybe second major failure in the recording project, and that is just nothing. That is nothing because
I can tell you, I was told no by probably 100 people.
That's right. And I guarantee that's going to happen to me and Wyatt, but we're just going to keep going, and hopefully we're going to have more people say yes. And we actually, one beneficial thing about the internet is that we get to post our videos and how wax cylinders are recorded, how orchestras were recorded, how piano was recorded, how trumpet was recorded, whatever. And our videos have hundreds and thousands and millions of views. So that gets us some exposure. And we've actually had people reach out to us, which
Really
is
cool. That's great to do. I didn't have that opportunity. I wish I did. I mean, if I did, I would have made this a much bigger thing. But I had to work kind of like basically writing letters and making phone calls. That was it. And I made phone calls to some fascinating people and had great conversations with was it Paul Tibbets, who was the pilot of the Enola Gay? I got a hold of him. I got to sit and talk with him. I talked to Lauren Bacall. She didn't want to do it. I tried several great writers. I wrote them, and some I sat and talked to. I talked to Ted Kennedy. He was interested, but then he got a brain tumor. The Prime Minister of Japan was interested in doing it. I wrote the Queen of England. I mean, I tried everything. And I got a beautiful letter back from Buckingham Palace. And because I said Queen Victoria made a recording on wax, it's only right that as we celebrate the 100th anniversary of Queen Victoria's reign, that you should make a recording. I tried. I did my best. And they wrote a beautiful, kind letter saying, we really appreciate your efforts. Unfortunately, the Queen's schedule. I said, we will go to you. We will, and that's what I did. I always went to everybody. I didn't ask them to come to me. I recorded an individual from the Tuskegee Airmen. I recorded some jazz folks. I recorded original member of Paul Whiteman's orchestra. In fact, a CD that was put out in the early part of the 21st century of Gershwin tunes. I have a track on there that I made recording the orchestra on cylinder.
beautiful.
Now, the interesting thing was they didn't believe it would sound as good as it did. So they added noise. You ever notice they do that to make it should sound old? And so they made it much more tinny than it actually was. And well, they do that also with wire recording as well. They make noise in it. They said it shouldn't sound so good. People don't understand the history, but
they don't.
I'm excited to see what Wyatt's doing, and I would love to be at some of these recordings.
Yes, we will absolutely invite you. And as we approach the half-an-hour mark, I have a few very important closing remarks about this project. This project is going to be a long project, and we are very grateful for Jack handing it over to Wyatt. I'm going to help and do my best with assisting Wyatt in this project. Jack is going to be present at many of the recordings, maybe the first one. And I always imagine this as fishing, because you seek and seek and seek. You maybe think you got a catch, but nothing. There's going to be that one special catch that we get, and then the fish are going to all be swimming towards our bait. I know that's a crude way of saying that.
Very true. Get a president, okay? Once you get someone of that kind of stature, you become legitimate.
That's right. That's right.
That's the important thing. If you don't have that, as crazy as that sounds, you need to have that legitimacy. And once you have that legitimacy, you're like a magnet, and you attract. Yeah.
Exactly. And right now I'm just some kid who goes to the Eastman School of Music, so and I think me and Wyatt were talking about maybe doing a few musicians as well, because musicians are very popular as well. So, and then we're just going to build our way up, and we're really looking forward to doing this. That's going to end it for this episode. I want to thank Jack for telling those wonderful stories. That was remarkable and really eye-opening and inspiring. So, Jack, if you have anything to say in closing, please.
Just in closing, I have the best and warmest wishes to you and Wyatt in this project, because it's near and dear to my heart. I mean, it is basically following the desires and wishes of Thomas Edison, who invented sound recording.
Exactly.
Record the voices of those who influence us. There's no more noble thing than that. I mean, I can't go any further than that. So
beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. That's going to be the end. And hopefully in the next episode, we'll have Wyatt Markus chime in about cylinder recording and the project. Until then, we will see you next time. Thank you very much.